first things first, we'll kind of go along the panel. Everyone can give us a brief introduction, who they are, what they did, and we'll take some questions from the audience later on. I've got some for myself, but we're mainly here to listen to these four, so we'll start off with Ollie.
I'm Oliver Frey, and I used to be mainly responsible for covers, the pictures, and internal illustrations for Crash and Zap and all our magazines in the end. But I was also co-director of Newsfield. But I think that's about all.
That's about all. Yeah. Do you really need any more?
Don't need any more. Anyways, I think David Ward said not that long ago that if you can remember it, you probably weren't there. That old adage. Yeah. I'm Roger Kean. I started editing Crash from day one, page one. It was going to be something like an 18-page magazine. It turned into, I think it was about 128 pages, the first issue. I've forgotten, actually. You see, that's it.
You weren't there?
I wasn't there. So, yeah, I was responsible for the editorial and bringing people along who could help out and turn Newsfield into something pretty big.
Hello, my name's Steve. I was very lucky to be able to join ZZap in relatively early days, thanks to Rog. It was actually Graham Kidd and Mr. Penn, I believe, who took me through my life of working at BIP, down the road in Oldbury. So I'm a local lad, me. Yeah, so I joined ZZap, worked there for a while, then I was, Graham gave me my second job when I moved to Future Publishing in Bath, which is where I launched the world's first Sega Mega Drive, first Sega console magazine, and I launched Edge and official Nintendo magazine and official PlayStation magazine, and I redesigned the official Xbox magazine, and I did Commodore Format, and I did Total, and T3.
You sound like my kids when they go, and then...
Yeah, and then there was...
and then we had an ice cream.
There was no ice cream involved, but that's me. So I'm just kind of I've piggybacked on this today. So hello,
Coattails. Gary Penn. I was. What was I?
Drunk?
Yeah, most of the time. Trying to think what I was. Reviewer. We're called reviewers. We started in '85. No, we started in '84. Sorry. Started in '84, but didn't get down to Yeovil till '85. So it was Chris Anderson found me on the streets, and it was a competition to find Britain's best game. I thought, what was the magazine called?
PC.
It was a magazine.
PCG? Personal Computer Games.
Yeah,
PCG.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I can't remember where I came. It wasn't first. It wasn't last. There you go. And it wasn't Julian. Funny enough, didn't come first either. I can't remember the guy's name. He's signed to the history books now. Anyway.
First.
Yeah, the guy came first. It's just some guy. And
Simon Cowell around.
No, it wasn't Simon Cowell. And since then, I've done all sorts of stuff. So, I've launched some more magazines, and I got a bit bored of that, and did some freelance stuff. And then after that, I went into what did I do after that? I worked on some things. I was freelance producer for Konami for a while. That was good. Was producer on, actually I probably shouldn't say that, producer on Frontier Elite 2. Now, I have to say, that was not my fault. That was Game Tech came in and said, we don't need any of you cunts, we're just going to take this and publish it ourselves. Much to David and I, who were going, what? No, it was pretty much that. And I found out years later they didn't phone me up to get all the stuff because they were scared. There you go. So what was that? Oh, and BMG Interactive. So I was senior producer at BMG Interactive for a while. That's software publishing. And then from that, I met Dave Jones and got a job at DMA Design as creative director, and then a bit of Rockstar and some stuff since. And I'm at Denki now. So I've done loads.
Is it true you got GTA made?
No.
Did you convince them to make GTA?
Sort of. Well, what it was I worked for the American division of BMG in London. And used to have these kind of weekly conference calls because they like to do that sort of thing. They had this boss called Jay Moses, who was an utter fucker, and he'd do this fantastic trick where he'd get his secretary to phone you up and go, "Oh, Jay wants to have a meeting with you in like a conference call in like 15 minutes." And he'd keep you waiting. You'd be waiting and waiting, waiting, waiting. And about an hour later, he'd turn up on the phone, and he'd have this 5-minute conversation where he'd just, I don't know, bawl you out about something or other. That was it. It's that kind of guy. And a fantastic argument driving. I was doing about 100 miles an hour down the motorway. I went to see a developer. It might be an NMS. And they were running really late. I know this isn't Newsfield related.
Oh yeah, that.
Oh yeah, that. I'll stop that.
So today will be a good day. We've had a C word and an F word already. We're only a couple of minutes in. It's a good word. So we'll take Roger and Ollie back slightly earlier than this. 83, it was you started, sourcing games for Germany.
Yes.
And your sort of initial printing experience, I guess, was the catalogue for those games. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you got into that? And
Sounds really big. Sourcing games for Germany. Yeah, the whole country.
Well, to be honest, it wasn't me or Oliver. It was actually Oliver's brother Franco. Yeah, he was sourcing Spectrum games for a German contact because this German guy thought that the Spectrum was going to be big, but they couldn't get any games, of course. So
You'd have to put them in condoms and swallow them.
yes, probably.
Spectrum. Ship them out the window.
Cut into Bibles and things like that. Yeah. So.
Some class A's.
So yes, Franco was getting these games, and we suddenly thought, well, there's not many shops selling anything, if any at all. In fact, at that time, Boots and Smiths hadn't even started. So we thought, oh, well, we'll start a mail order business, and
I think you had to make your own computers back then.
yeah, well, we did. Well, you did have a ZX80 built.
Yeah. And the 81 was the tipping point where they decided you could do one alternative.
That was it. He brought his ZX81 up once, and I actually managed to get a white square to move across the black screen. And I was going, hey, look at this.
Yeah. The reflection from the window, Roger. There's Roger like a cat.
But I hadn't quite worked out how to fire something at it and get it to blow up when the Spectrum came out, so that put pay to that. Yeah, so we produced, I think we only did a couple of catalogues, which were very critical review vehicles. It was basically the blurb on the back of the cassette, with a very good at the bottom of each one, and Oliver's drawings. And these were just typed up on a Smith Corona electric typewriter, which had lost its carriage return, so you had to do it manually. Onto A4.
The W and the R.
That's right. Yeah, it didn't work terribly well, but at least it was legible, and Oliver filled in the gaps with his illustrations, and we sent them down to the instant printer down the road in Ludlow, and got these, I think it was a 16-page catalogue, and those went out. We did quite well, not badly at all. And then a guy from, at the time, a fairly large magazine distributor rang me up and said one of these fell into my hands, and I took it to this distributor, to W.H. Smith, sorry, and they said, well, if you could get a magazine like that, we'll sell it. So he rang me up and said, what do you reckon? So we went down, all the way down to, I forgot where it was now, in Kent, and had a chat, and they said, yes, okay, we'll go. And we found I raised £2,500 on Barclaycard, ostensibly because you had to give a good reason in those days, and this was to build a new kitchen. So with £2,500 we launched into the first issue of Crash, which was going to come out in time for Christmas, but it didn't. And Smith started looking at the early spreads and said, you've got no colour. And I said, well, we can't afford colour, it's going to be on newsprint.
What else was around at the time?
What else was around? It was CNVG was around, but it hadn't, and it did do game reviews, but
it was still very staid.
It was very staid.
Most of it was typed in listings.
Yeah, there was lots of peeks and pokes and typed in listings and things like that, yeah. And they did do game reviews.
As well.
Your computer.
All had little snippets of games.
Yeah, PCG had already started about 6 months before, personal computer games. And your Sinclair. Yeah. And Dennis was about to start your Spectrum, and in fact we went down to talk to them, and we were told we were far too late. Where do you live? Ludlow. It's Ludlow. And said, well, it's near Wales, up in... Yes. Roars of laughter. Not a hope in hell. Look, your Spectrum's going to wipe the floor. It didn't. Not the first, anyway.
But you, of course, did use it to wipe your floor.
Yes, we did. Yes, well, that's another story. The personal computer... was it Personal Computer World shows? That started the sticker wars, where we had all our Crash and Zap stickers and used to go and plaster them over your Spectrums and your Commodores and CNVG.
So how much of a risk was it, do you think, back then to start off a magazine like this? Because you put your own money into it, and it is literally, at that age, a fledgling industry. It's kind of just growing. You're saying there's already magazines that are beating you to it, so...
Yes, but the big difference was that Crash was just devoted to games. None of the others, except perhaps arguably PCG was, but PCG was multi-format in the sense that it was covering Spectrum, probably not even Commodore yet. What was in there?
BBC,
bit of Oric, bit of Dragon, So we were just doing the games, and our infrastructure costs were very low because apart from me, my broken Smith Corolla typewriter, and no salaries to pay out because we couldn't afford to, there was Ludlow School. And something like
busking for food.
Well, they got wind of we're selling games out of the front door, which we weren't really, but the word got round. Somebody saw an ad.
Did you sell one first, or did you?
No, we put an ad. We started putting ads in CNVG.
It's an underground network.
And they were half-page ads, black, with white little boxes to tick, so nobody could ever read what they were looking at. And somebody in Ludlow got this. It got round the playground, and before you knew it, the people queuing at the door. Like Matthew Uffindale, so just a kind of 17-year-old, just was at college then, and he wanted to buy games. Robin Candy was another, lived just over the road, came in, and then others came in, and it got around the school, and I suddenly thought, well, we have the resource here, these are the people that my games are aimed at, and why on earth wouldn't we get them to write the reviews?
So it's like a Korean spec shop, but in Ludlow.
It was only it wasn't 17 towers to fall down.
It wasn't that sweaty.
It wasn't that sweaty, no. So but the risk was colossal, and in fact it came true because Wells Gardner Darden, the distributors who had inveigled us into spending our money, went bust on the second issue. So we never received payment. We didn't get any payment for the first issue. They forced us into it.
I know it's no word I was unfamiliar with.
Well, it's a Lloyd Mackerel sort of word.
Yeah, it's in the long dictionary, long word dictionary.
Your reviews then came from these kids who would take and playing these games. I did ask you this last time. Did you tailor any? Were they too honest? But you kind of You just took the reviews as it came straight from these kids' mouths. No, we tended to sort of, it kind of naturally drifted into the ones who could actually write reasonable English. Tended to get the in. But the only tailoring was done was quite simply making it in English. Putting vowels in. The problem. The first problem we had, we thought it was a good idea. Look, we'll have a minimum of 3 reviewers on every game. And that was very naive because, of course, they'd start having fist fights about their opinions, and so there had to be a little bit of adjudication. But I think we tried to get across, as we did in Zap afterwards, in a different way, the notion that you didn't have to agree. That was the point. You probably get to like Matthew Uffindale's reviews. You trusted him, so you believe what he said against Ben Stone, for instance. So at what point was the decision to go single format with Crash and later Zap? With Crash, that was always the way. It was always going to be just for the Spectrum. And Chris Anderson approached me and said, can we do the same for the Commodore? And I said, but you're the editor of the noble PCG magazine, glowing colour. And he said, yes, but he wanted to work on a single format vehicle, and could he do it? And he said, yeah. By then we'd made enough money just to cover those costs. So
it's an interesting pairing as well, but only with hindsight I realised that Newsfield and Chris actually had quite a lot in common.
Yeah.
It just at the time didn't seem it because there was a lot of friction. But with hindsight, you realise, geez, actually both were trying to do the same thing, just in their own.
That's right, and Chris was very enthusiastic. He was also very critical because with Crash we'd packed so much in. So for the technically minded, our type font was Helvetica, set 8-point on 8 solid. And Chris said, well, kids can't read that. And I said, well, Crash isn't doing too badly. But he had his way. I think you went to 9-point on 13 or something, so there's nice wide space between the lines.
Just so he didn't have to write his
Right. That's right.
That's what I've wasn't done.
We were saved by Comag, which was Britain's, and probably still is Britain's biggest magazine distributor. They were not at all interested in Crash to begin with, but the first two issues did do so well. They advanced us the money to carry on, and they collected the money from issue 2 from the news trade, but we never got a penny from issue 1.
Why the lack of interest in the early issues?
Too much risk. Who's interested in a single format magazine when you've got C&VG?
And also, there's lots of the big publishers around at the time. You had, I can't remember who they were, but EMAP was certainly quite prominent. But yeah,
giant.
who was publishing your computer? That wasn't
VNU.
VNU, that's right.
I was going to ask you actually, Gary, about the single format, because I mean, you've gone on to start other magazines, Edge, probably the most well known, I would imagine, but you've also done single format things as well. Is that Steve? Sorry, Steve.
I was actually consulting on that. I was involved in all the little brainstorming things. Yeah, I was going, we should get rid of ratings. you got Greg Ingham and a few others going, no, we can't get rid of ratings. Advertisers really like ratings. Get rid of ratings.
So the single format thing, it obviously works because it's still going on now. But it tends maybe to be brands now. You get the official Nintendo one. You don't tend to get it broken down.
But also fewer platforms as well. Back then it was kind of. I don't know what you describe it as, some freakish Wild West. I mean, it certainly had that, in terms of a feel, the whole thing was very much a kind of cottagey, chummy, villagey kind of vibe, and everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew what everybody thought of everybody, and I don't know, it was very casual, very small, but at the same time you had, it's like grazing, you're wandering along the plains and you see this little thing pop up and it's, what the hell's that? And it's a Jupiter race. And you go, what's over there? And that's an auric. And then suddenly that begats the auric atmos. And you had all these freaky little formats coming out. And certainly when I was younger, I was interested in every single damn format, regardless of. And that's perpetuated. Even when I was ZZap, I was still interested in other stuff. So there's that. You end up with this. I mean, it's one or t'other. You can't. Well, I did end up launching a purely 16-bit games magazine. It wasn't actually my choice to focus purely on 16-bit because it's a really strange means of grouping stuff together. It's publishing.
And you also get some consoles towards the end of that are claim to be 32 but are actually just 16-bit.
Yeah, frankly, who gives a shit anyway?
It might have had a 32-bit GPU.
You get two different types of audience really. With the multi-format, you'll get, and it's not even a question of refinement. It's more a question of obsession, I guess. You get that broader interest on multi-format, which probably would have been me actually. Although I tended to bias more towards the Commodores just because I think my first.
Because they were better.
No, it was. Don't start. 64 rules! It was. Yeah, I don't know why I moved to 64. I can't remember. I think it's because my mate's dad had a pet, and that's where I used to spend most of my time coding.
That was a pet computer.
Yeah.
You were on a hamster.
His budgie inspired me.
That was before, yeah. But the single format stuff, you get this fantastic sort of depth of reader. And I think that's one of the things that Newsfield capitalised on really well. Naturally well.
That and the battle between the Spectrum and the Commodore.
Yeah.
Both magazines played for all
Well, that was.
worth.
I think.
But that's our audience did.
I think what worked well though is that we always took this sort of. I wouldn't say a holier than thou stand. It wasn't pious, but we were kind of we were to the side of it, not really above it, and it was bubbling under this. You had the tension bubbling under. And we were kind of, there's not necessarily one better than the other. But I think that rivalry helps a lot because you get that energy and that passion coming through.
There's always a lot of laughter over the SID chip, though.
Ting, 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 ting.
It's just amazing.
Is it coming from a Spectrum owner? I'm less than it.
So weirdly, the SID chip wasn't as good as the Vic. The Vic sound chip was actually better in many respects. It's an odd thing about that.
I have a very, very tailored view of this whole thing.
If you look back at the Crash and ZZap issues now, obviously one of the main things that stands out is, of course, Ollie's artwork. So how did that kind of become a main feature of the magazine, if you like? How did it become, so entwined with the magazine, because they are, symbolic of.
It's a good slice of character as well. I mean, it's the shop window for a start.
Yeah.
It really stood out as good. Sorry
Thank
to start singing your praises, but for me it was one of the pivotal parts of the magazine. As much as you had, particularly with ZZap, you had the three sort of characters, as it were. was that the artist, as it were, was almost that kind of...
It was the brand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not
The brand
even,
was the logo
not even a
on the
fourth
top.
Beatle type thing. It was an important wrapping. It wasn't
I've
a
been
Ringo.
called the fourth Beatle.
No, well, it's not. Well, it's not. It's not like a Ringo Starr thing.
It's one of the good ones.
It's more ephemeral. You've got
One of the good Beatles.
You've got this kind of this thing binding this together.
It is also a natural resource, not to be wasted, weren't you?
That's
You're a natural resource.
It's great. You have holes, so you can fill a hole with
Yes.
something of value, which is what I really like. So,
Well, actually, nobody would have said I don't have to block.
No, but I was just going to say that so many of the other magazines had to rely on photography work, and that meant that in the early days they were very much at the mercy of a software house because that had an interesting cover, and that immediately meant that the magazine was endorsing the game automatically, whereas we didn't have to do that because Oliver, somebody like, I'm seeing when you were assistant editor on Zap and I was still editing, but I just basically sat back and let you and Gary and Jazz get on with it. But so they were the ones coming up with the ideas and going to Oliver and saying, oh, I want this. Like leaderboard, the famous leaderboard. What the hell do you put on the cover?
Yes.
It's exciting about golf. What happened?
well, that's easy. You license a picture of Seridas there, Ross.
Yes.
Which is what they were doing. You get this fantastic and sad grown-up mentality bubbling under the industry, which is where I think Newsfield, this breath of fresh air that came. And then Chris, I think, had that same almost, I mean, it's not pure, there's a childish spirit of, no, let's do it this way.
Touch of irresponsibility.
Yeah, there's an irreverence.
I think it all started off though because the early games were so boring to look not to play but to look at.
Yeah.
And they called anything
weren't
Battle
too bad,
of
they
the
moved
Galaxy
static.
and it didn't look like it.
And also the cassette players have been quite drawings as well.
Well, yeah.
I've got a brother, he's a good drawer.
Yeah.
Draw me a picture of a spaceship blowing up an alien.
So was it a more expensive way to do it, to use your art? Was photography cheaper, or...?
Well, no, I came free, didn't I? So,
He got a salary eventually.
He sort of sat in the
It's almost
corner.
like a very
well,
We should come to it. He's actually a trained illustrator.
Yes,
And he's done comic books and other things. He wasn't just some guy sitting and going,
no.
no.
Well, no, I carried on earning money by doing illustrations for Look and Learn and Eagle.
What was your
Dan
comic
Dare.
strip one? Was it Dan
Dan
Dare?
Dare.
Lord Dan Dare.
His artwork is awesome for Dan Dare.
Although that was the late period when they printed it in cheap newsprint.
Which destroys it, yeah.
And I couldn't even colour it
amazing.
in. They coloured it in. I just had to provide the line
He
drawing.
did
They
some
did
coloured ones. And
cheap printers, coloured like the American comics used
They used
to.
to get old ladies to do that. They cut the film, or it wasn't even
Something like that.
And they get the blue all over the face and go.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was going to mention that one of the things that it's a real shame that we never managed to capture, which I think you'd have loved to see because I used to love it every fucking issue. Was you'd catch Ollie when he was building. He was really quick, which staggered me.
Yeah.
Amazingly quick, given the quality. It was easy to be quick, but it was the quality that staggered me. But it was seeing this thing grow was fantastic. Also the bits where there was almost a hint of like somebody scraping away a bit of Mona Lisa, and you realise, oh right, it was a bloke underneath the Mona Lisa beforehand. And you'd see bits where Ollie sometimes would change something, and you'd catch it between. It might take a couple of days to do something, but you'd pop up there and see what he was doing, and he'd have his board and his bits of tape. And I used to find the process fascinating. You see the covers evolving, and then suddenly you get this final piece. And he adds like little bits of this, that, and the other with whatever medium's lying around. This little bit with his airbrush and so on. I'd love to have caught that, but we never really caught.
Was there a part of the magazine that was always the last to finish? Was it your artwork? Was it the reviews? Was it...
Actually, one thing that I remember that I was involved in was with Zap. We had Little Rockford
And Thing.
and Thing
Thing
on the Spring, and they were added at the last.
Right.
As the pages were finished layout, I had to come up with
This was
some silly little statements that Rockford and Thing would
It's
make.
funny because they were irritating at first, but people really liked them.
Oh, they
so-
did, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know who first thought of them. Was it Chris?
I can't remember. It may have
I know Chris sort of got the
Well, we-
license to use Rockford and Thing on a Spring from Gremlin.
Yeah, but we started using the little Ollie bugs and so on in Crash a little bit, but not quite to that degree at all.
But this was still the day, of course,
And
when
then
layout was
Miyazaki
done on
style,
paper,
those
so you
later
could
on.
draw them.
It's Miyazaki style, those later on.
Now, you did get into trouble for one of your covers, didn't you? It was almost pulled. The infamous Barbarian.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a bit about how that came about and was resolved. And
Well, I don't know if it was resolved.
well, they still
Well, it
saw
was,
it, didn't they?
it was suggestive, I suppose, of too much violence, and W.H. Smith squeaked.
But
like
somebody
mad.
obviously complained. And
Yeah,
they
I think
said,
parents complained about it.
some parents complained, and the Smiths buyer got on to, not me, I think Franco or somebody, and said, this is really serious, we're going to have to put it on the top shelf, you realise.
Where the kids can't reach.
This also happened with the Hannah Gordon, wasn't it? When she was tipstress for Crash. And Graham wanted her in a mud wrestling scene, and Oliver did a very, very, very realistic, very good quality cover, and that was another one. Smith said, we'll have to go on the top shelf.
Too sexy.
If she's
Too
got
sexy.
any pride, she'd have that on her wall.
Yeah.
I haven't
I
seen that
don't-
for a long time.
And I don't know what happened to the
original,
painting.
Was there not an issue with Green Beret as well? Some blood.
There's too many blood
Too
spots.
many blood spots.
Yeah.
Some strange.
Because it was too strong
Yeah.
for the game.
And
Was that a flattering thing, or did that feel like you're selling out? Or
I didn't particularly mind. I mean, they were paying again, so I just thought it was silly, but
well, there was, of course, also that was not a cover. There was the ad, the Ocean ad.
Imagine.
Well, it was an Imagine game, wasn't it?
oh, the nipple, yeah.
Yeah, with the nipple. Yeah. And Ocean. I don't know whether Dave, I think David Ward rang up and said, panic, saying, could we do something before it went to press? And we had all their artwork, everything. So Oliver painted a bit more of a
bit of armour.
a bit more armour, a bit more bar, yeah.
Which then they stitched in on film.
Yes, we had a repro
Well,
stitches in.
Which was another-
He just painted the patch, we sent it and they...
Another fascinating thing about the process was how, again, something both you and Chris had in common was that early adoption of technology. So
Yeah.
the fact they did all the manufacturing in-house, the production, in-house.
Which nobody else did.
No, which nobody else did. And that was also good because apart from the fact that you get that kind of character, the personality, the energy coming through because it's handled by the people actually making the thing. Really handy if things mess up or you're running a bit late or you want to keep your costs down. But it was fascinating to see that stuff occurring. With that. You're seeing this magazine go from people's heads and screens to through this process with the bits of film and so on, and understanding how all the process works and seeing this thing happen upstairs in this tiny little room.
Well, I had a real eye opener when I sadly left Newsfield. I was in the wilderness for a couple of months, and eventually got a job at CU Amiga. It was the Commodore user then, and so I went to London, having come from the back of Beyond in Ludlow, and I kind of went, oh, okay, London, well, here we go. This is proper publishing.
Sorry, I just remember that. I didn't realise when we did the typesetting, that's proto-HTML.
Yes,
Proto-HTML, which basically says what the font will be, what size it will be, how wide the column will be, whether it's justified, unjustified, whether it's italic, centred, whatever, and then you put more in and you get a crosshead, which has gone up to 14-point bold. And by the time they'd finished editing and polishing, all the codes were in place. It went down the road to, it was our instant printer, but he had a CR-tronic typesetting machine.
That's right. Check your codes. Make sure.
He just checked the codes, put it in, and 5 minutes later you get this great sheet of bromide ready to cut and paste in place.
I do remember very distinctly Dave Weston having a little bit of a moan at me because
He made
you only had to leave out one tiny mark on the embedded
It's the
commands.
same as HTML, because I think it was even Greater Van Western as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's the same as HTML.
So you turn on a point size and bold, and you get great big things. So you do that for your headings, and if you left off a little slash,
it went bold.
the rest of the 1,000-word review would also be in 64-point bold. And I remember coming back with this great big roll of bromide, which was like a toilet roll of text. Yeah, and he was going, I'm sorry, I've got one command, and it was all 64-point bold. Well, it was probably bigger than that. Headings was like it was huge. Yeah, so I got.
That meant it would be half a mile long as well.
Yes, it was absolutely massive. Yeah, I should have kept it really.
So can you take us back a bit, Steve, how you came to find yourself at Newsfield?
Oh, I was a very lucky boy. I was a Zap reader, and I absolutely adored the magazine. Genuinely, not saying that for these guys. I loved it. I had Commodore 64. I'd seen the Spectrum, and I thought, this is it. This is the new frontier of gaming in computing. But the 64 just appealed to me because I'm sort of a bit more aesthetically, I'm less aesthetically challenged as your normal Spectrum user. Yeah, plus that as well. Yeah, since the incident, and I got a Commodore 64 and got the magazine and loved it. And I was training to be an industrial chemist, and I was a crap industrial chemist.
I told you, it was Brian Cranston. It's way ahead of
yeah. And
his VW camper van.
Gary Liddon left. Gary Liddon left to be a programmer, and they said, we need somebody to fill his boots. And I went, well, I'll apply. And I genuinely applied for the job in the hope that I would get to go to Newsfield. I would meet Gary and Julian Bignell and Roger and Ollie. And I did, and I went back and I saw my mate Ian over there. I went back and I said, guess what I've been? I said, I've been for an interview at Newsfield. He went, get off. Yeah. I said, no, genuinely. And anyway, I had the interview, went home and didn't think any more of it. And it was about 3 months later. Because didn't you hire somebody ahead of me? I think I was like your third choice, and I think, yeah, great. I think the one guy turned up and wasn't very good, or one guy accepted the job and they never actually took it, accepted a different job.
There's also the fact that Gary Liddon had moved on to Thalamus Games,
yeah,
so he was still partly available.
Oh, okay. Oh, right, okay, yeah. So anyway, let's cut long story short.
This fucker as well. Jesus Christ, he went to one of the PCW shows, which is brilliant. They used to be so good because you get to meet people, which is fantastic. You get to meet industry people as well. It's kind of this family village thing going, which was superb, and smoking lots, which was also great. And drinking lots, thinking about it. But there were really good sort of social occasions for industry and public alike. And it was a lovely sort of flatness to it. There was no sort of hierarchy of anything. Everybody was kind of just mixing in. And I think we came back from one of those. I think Julian and Gary had been left behind. I can't think what issue this was. I forget what it was. I think by this point I was arsehead, and they'd done fuck all basically. They'd pissed around for 2 days, long weekend.
Yeah, lovely time in London.
Fucking ballistic. Yeah, so that's what they were like. If you left, so particularly if you left Gary alone, it was terrible. He's this weird, certainly at the time, this weird talent where he'd write this fantastic copy.
Oh, it was
but
great.
It was a fucking mess.
It was wonderful.
It was the most, from a sub-editing point of view, it was an absolute nightmare. So you're reading through the thing going, this is great, but can't print that.
This is when I handed all that over to Gary.
Right.
This is too much. I'll concentrate on the thinking up the neat ideas we could also do.
I find it almost amazing, really, that all four of you actually, maybe without you realising it, have recognised little incidents and related it to an issue. But all the issues must have blurred together. You must have been working on December before November was out. It must have been just one continuous run, yet you can remember each.
It's one of the depressing things,
it's 30 years ago,
isn't it? That you're sort of you're just coming out of summer and you're already planning your January issue.
No time to breathe.
And you've still got 3 or 4 in between that, working the whole 3 months ahead.
I think what we did was work and drink. That's about it.
Yeah, we used to go to the Bull and we had our table. We had the Newsfield table, didn't we? A nice big one. And if anybody had dared sit there before we got there, then they'd just stand there.
These fantastic bull burgers, which were not that fantastic actually, but they were these weird.
You were drunk.
Yeah, well, exactly. Didn't really care. But they weren't sort of. Well, they were burger shaped. They were more like a ball that somebody can squish a little bit.
It's like meatball between 2 bits of bread.
Yeah, 2 tiny bits of bread. Yeah.
Yes,
Very greasy.
The Bull was it.
There was a good rivalry between some of the magazines, which led to an incident we talked about last time. Do you want to tell that story again about the fluffy little lollipop magazine?
Well, there's actually, in a sense, there's 2, but that was Leaderboard, yes, and it was a US Gold game. I think we were all pretty much agreed it was going to be a big game. Sizzler should be on the cover. And all of us said, well, I can't, what do we do? I mean, it's just a figure, on a green with a stick. And
I remember that was one of the few games that everybody played.
Yeah, it was really good. Everybody wanted to play it.
Little tournaments going.
Yeah, we had to have it on the cover, and at the time, we'd what was his name, Jacobs of your Commodore, one of those, one of the.
We used to call him the slap-headed twat.
It was Commodore User that came out with the fluffy lollipop.
That's it. It was Commodore User, and the Jacobs had said that ZZap was nothing more than a fluffy lollipop magazine. And I think it was me. Said, "That's the cover." This girl with a lollipop.
Is that the one you want?
going like this, and you can see the golfer in her glasses, so he's small, and around it there's all these 14-year-old boys going like this. So that was that cover, and of course the other embarrassing one wasn't so much the cover, that I'd been chasing Bill Scolding, editor of Sinclair User, for about 6 months to come and work for us, because he was really good. And he was very keen, and in fact he came to Ludlow and we settled the deal, and it was all going to be, he'd have to go back and resign and everything, and Graham Kidd came out with Unclear User.
Oh, yes.
That put the cat amongst the pigeons. EMAP famously sued us. Well, they wanted to sue us for defamation of character, and they got an injunction, so I had to go down to London to the Courts of Justice and listen to this injunction hearing where you're told to sit and you can't say a word. And the weird thing is, it didn't go to the trade bench as it should have. It went to the Queen's bench, and the judge there had no idea about trade. He was shown their cover, and he said, "That's George Cole. That's disgraceful." Their brief was going, "No, that's not the point, my lad." And then he got stuck on the fact that, what, you mean, so they use Times 12 point and 12 and 8 point, and so is this spoof? Well, this is outrageous. This is copyright theft. So he did the injunction on the grounds of copyright theft because we'd used the same typeface. And that gave EMAP a huge headache because there was no way they could win a court case on that. They knew full well. So they pursued it, and in the end we paid up. But it did crash a lot of good. But I didn't get Bill Scolding because obviously after that he just couldn't in all conscience come and work for Newsfield.
There's a strange bitterness that EMAP had, and they never seemed to like, because I went to work at EMAP after Newsfield, and they were so behind. There's this massive organisation that was so technically behind Newsfield in every way, but moreover, the magazines they were producing, they didn't understand they were trying to capture the lightning that Newsfield had captured in the bottles, and they didn't get it, and they were so embittered by the whole thing. And this is why I think they do things like the injunction. Normally big publishers would say, fuck that.
No, they just said, no, it's a joke.
It really bugged them that you've got these, I don't know, these weird freaky guys in this weird freaky little town in the middle of nowhere near Wales where they fuck sheep, and they don't like this.
We were described as rural pirates in the injunction.
We're proper grown-up publishers, and we know what we're doing. We've been going for hundreds of bloody years, and we're going to have these kids coming in and doing all this stuff. But it staggered me when I got there how embittered most of the EMAP staff were towards Newsfield.
I want to take some more questions from the audience in a couple of seconds, but I just want to ask you first about the whole issue surrounding cover tapes and how you came to start using them and how that all came about.
Yeah, it's a miserable business, really. Because you'd really moved on before.
No, I did the first one.
You did, we did some early ones, didn't we, actually? Both on Crash and Zap. We tried them out.
We decided with that first one, though, if we were going to do it, we were going to do it in some sort of, we called it the sampler. We tried to do it in some sort of nice way rather than being some sort of...
It was giving something extra because it was, samples of games coming up and things like that.
Or things that didn't come out. So Jeff chopped out his Made in France pause mode. We had a pause mode within a game within the pause mode, I think it was. It was cool. And we got...
remember this? We had the
Chris...
The Sensi software did their little 3D demo.
Well, Chris had knocked up this 3D demo, that was going to become a game. I don't know if you've read my fantastic book, by the way.
Available in all good stores.
It is currently in a Barbican retrospective. Actually, I was really quite chuffed about that. They're actually going to make that into a game, and so we had that little slice of technology that was Phil Polly's on a 64. So we had that little demo. We had Rob especially did us a live remix of what was it, Sanctions theme. That was fucking
Sanctions
amazing.
theme, yeah.
No one had anything like that.
No, that was really good.
So that occupied the B side.
But that was extra value. What happened afterwards was that companies like then Future were already doing superlatively well financially.
The pioneers.
Yeah, well, Mr. Ingram, when he got the bit between his teeth, wasn't going to let anyone have anything on the cover. Ingram, sorry, not Ingram, Mr. Ingram. And EMAP followed suit very, very rapidly, and both organisations had much deeper pockets than Newsfield.
And we entered the cover mat wars.
The cover mat wars. We even had conferences about it where we kind of did cabal, not a cabal, what is it? Agree not to spend more than so much on the cover.
It was like an arms limitation.
It was.
Where they said, look, let's not, because we were saying we've got 2 games we've got 2 games demos, and so they had 3 games demos, and they go, well, we've got a full game. Okay, well, we've got 2 full games. And we go, well, let's just, because this is just
That's
going
how
mad.
it is.
It's the same
so-
bullshit as free to play, actually, 20 years earlier. It's an escalation towards 0, really.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's like
It
razor
was
blades.
a
You can
race
get
thing,
razor
wasn't it?
blades with 5 blades now.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
can take
yeah.
your face off, so.
Yeah, well, it also escalated even later with the consoles, where you couldn't do anything like that. So China came off really well out of this, because all these British companies were roaring over there to pick up whirly things and things you could stick on the cover and everything, and 3D glasses and everything. And ultimately, I think, Newsfield probably suffered first the worst downturn as a result of becoming, like Crash became a pamphlet with a game on it, a collection of games on it. But I think it damaged everybody in the end.
I left EMAC because of that. There were 2 reasons I left. I was doing the One magazine at the time, and I was adamant we were going to have cover discs. I was so
You Amiga
against them.
one for Amiga.
I was 16-bit games, so it was Amiga, STPC. I really didn't like the idea of cover games, but if we were going to do it, we were going to try and do a nice job again. So again, we adopted that same mentality of, we asked, we were always really chummy with developers. And again, another thing that was really nice about Newsfield, we carried that forwards into the other companies we worked for.
I bet nobody else ever had Jeff Minter sitting in front of the fireplace in a big inn at the bottom of Ludlow with people sort of going...
Well, that also reminds me of the time when we had the musicians' ball, which was amazing. And we had all the musicians up, and spoke to Martin years later, he was gutted we didn't make it yet, because it looked so good. And it was fucking awesome. And we had all the musicians in our flat at the time, and they had a bunch of keyboards, and they were all just jamming all these 64 tunes. It was fucking awesome. And of course, these days, you'd be out with a smartphone going, oh, I'm going to record this and post it straight away. And in fact, you probably broadcast it live on Twitch. But at the time, you just sitting there going, oh, fuck, that's amazing. But I think that's one of the things, we gave a shit about who made the games rather than who published the games. And I think it was one of the key differences between Newsfield at the time. And even Chris wasn't necessarily like that, but it was definitely Newsfield were like this. They were interested in the people behind the scenes who actually really made the games.
They were the rock stars.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing we pushed forward, which of course no one else was doing. And the other magazines found a bit peculiar.
We've sort of crash hits rather than smash hits.
See what you did there.
Right, yeah. So that was one of the key differentiators there as well. So it's a fantastic package of uniqueness that's never been, well, from my mind, it's never been even, no one's got anywhere near that since. You've got that combination of Ollie's, and also that comic book quality as well. It suits the audience really well. So you've got this sort of primo comic book stuff on the front. It's almost like these days you'd have to go and employ famous comic book artists to do the same thing to get the same level of quality. But you've got this guy in house. As I said before, he's kind of like the invisible force member. Who's I think if you have the 3 characters so visible in terms of the illustrations themselves are kind of Ollie's character. It's almost like he's camera shy. I will let my work do just talking for me. That's not Ollie, that's just a very bad random French.
So if anyone's got a question out there you want to ask, just stick your hand up and we'll get around a few. Anybody? Must be somebody. Yeah.
I'm interested in how the LM magazine came about. That was
Lloyd
a useful
magazine?
one, wasn't it?
Lloyd Mangram's magazine, yeah. LM. We were aware that we kind of had all our eggs in one basket. It was all computer gaming, and I'm quite sure that Chris Anderson recognised the same danger very rapidly, because he began doing things like cross-stitch, which have nothing really much to do with computer gaming. I don't think we would ever have moved to something like cross-stitch, but we did want to do a magazine that was lifestyle. Wouldn't exclude computer gaming, but wasn't really about that, and it was a fairly clear idea as to where it would go. And the trouble really with LM, it's short-lived, because 2 things: it was very difficult to persuade the advertising revenue needed to come in, and secondly, I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years ahead of its time. More than that.
I think every publisher I've ever worked for since has been trying to do the same thing. It took years. It ended up being stuff like Nuts that worked.
Yeah.
But no, you'd have these meetings where you'd be discussing how are we going to appeal, how are we going to do this kind of men's magazine that's kind of like the ladies' magazines, but for men. But you can't have makeup tips and you can't have this, because men aren't going to give a shit about this kind of stuff. And of course it ends up being soft. Boring.
I remember an interview with a guy who did the Daily Sport, I forget his name now, but he said he was looking for a market, and you couldn't go top end and compete with big broadsheets. We said literally, we just went to the bottom and found the market.
Yeah, it was a holy grail though. People trying to produce this type of magazine that would appeal to because it didn't exist. It was this big hole.
Yeah, and it was a very expensive exercise because we didn't stint on the team, and we had 9 staff. 6 of them based in London, in offices in London, and the rest up at Ludlow, and several quite expensive freelancers. So it was expensive. And
curiously, your first multi-form magazine in some respects.
yes, it was. Yeah,
So it is because it's not dealing with one particular focus.
Well, I know we did. I think it was probably about issue. The biggest advertiser we got in, we were very pleased with, was a double page spread from C&A. For clothing, which was, it was a big number at the time, and they pulled out because on the 3rd issue, one of the major articles was about AIDS, and that was it. That was on the cover, and that was it. They just pulled out.
What's the one feature called Sea Chicks that pass in their eyes?
Yes. Yeah, there was.
Any other audience questions? Anybody? Yeah.
I've got a couple. It's cheating.
No, you
One,
can't.
who was the scorelord in ZZap? 2, Gary, did you decide to make the one single format?
No, I definitely.
3, Steve, do you still read Edge?
You said you had 2. Now, come on.
Sorry, that's a sneak.
Well, mine's easy, no.
No. And were you responsible for the editorial with it? It's not for everyone. Was those were your words?
Well, I mean, partially it was obviously when I'm doing it. There's me, there's a publisher involved, but I think it was a guy called Steve Carey came up with the idea of. He could see that it was going to be quite a sort of high end, which it was. It wasn't necessarily high end in terms of production values and stuff, but it was sort of high end in terms of the kind of gaming we were going for. And he sort of suggested this isn't going to be for everybody, is it? And we kind of played on that. Then we bagged it, so and then we did it.
The joke at the time was it was the one done properly.
It's the only one that's still going now, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, I do look at it from time to time, but I'm like most people. I go to lots of different websites for my gaming reviews. I go to Eurogamer quite a lot, even though I sort of detest its reviews, to be honest.
But you still didn't get your answer.
No.
The one was actually meant to be Edge, and I got Steve and Julian on board. It was supposed to be this kind of higher quality.
God, yeah, I did right for it, didn't I? You forgot.
You probably forgot my whole spiel. So I had this spiel. We're going to visit the software houses and talk about what it's meant to be. It's a very, very sincere thing. It was meant to be this sort of higher end magazine that used these fantastic new graphics that are coming through and didn't rely on photographs again. Same sort of thinking as Newsfield. I mean, you pick up all this stuff as you carry forwards. But we didn't really have the budgets. There was just 2 of us and had to outsource everything and basically just work 24 hours a day.
As usual.
Well, we made profit in the first issue, which is incredibly unusual. It was a similar to Edge in that it hit this cap readership, but a really influential readership. So the pass-on was huge, I think, as well. In terms of influence, they were really influential. They sort of capped out about 40k. The look was never as nice as stylish as Edge. We managed to capture that vibe in the same way that Edge did, which is why it was, I was joking about it, it was one of the things I can't remember, it was Greg or Steve Carey said that. I mean, like the one done properly.
It wasn't me, that's
that was incredibly popular in the industry. I mean, the amount of advertising, we had to turn advertisers away because we couldn't afford. You have a pagination, and you've got the flat tongue, and you're trying to determine the ratio of advertising to
yeah, that was always a battle at Newsfield.
It was actually Newsfield, the same thing.
Exactly. From your aspect, you'd be saying, well, they've taken 10 more pages for advertising. And we'd be saying, yeah, but you can't have any more pages because of the cost. There's a budget for it.
Actually, the colour thing was quite.
And it's very painful turning down advertising when people want to bung money at you.
Yeah, that wouldn't have happened today.
No. Well, there's a sweet spot with the ratio because if you have too much advertising, you get that feel. Even if you don't know, you just think it's full of ads.
Yeah.
And there is definitely
I sometimes get that feeling when I look at Empire magazine.
Yeah.
That it's just too overloaded now.
Yeah. And also the gaps between the editorial division.
Edge does that as well. I can appreciate it has to fund it to the technical people in the industry, but it's just far too much. Towards the end, it's just too much.
But part of the reason I left was they wanted to split it, and I didn't want to split it, and I wanted to do more with it.
So did they answer all three?
No, they've not scored all one. They kept looking that way.
I'm trying to think how to answer that. That's why that's currently in the back of my head. I'm multitasking that in the back of my head. It's not quite finished.
We'll keep that on the back burner.
Yeah,
Any
yeah.
other
Thank
from the
you.
audience before we do the last couple of minutes?
Yeah, two questions. One for Roger. Can you remember what your distribution figures were for your first issue of Crash? Because that must have been a proud
We
moment for you.
printed, as I recall, I think I'm correct, we printed 50,000, which was super ambitious. I think we sold about 48% of the copies after returns. It looked like it was going to be more, but there's always that, get the returns back.
Was that so hard then, wasn't it?
Yeah. Issue 2 was a little bit better. But once Coman got onto the distribution, things changed dramatically because they got it in everywhere, literally everywhere. And,
What was the highest selling issue?
the highest selling issue, the highest ABC for Crash was 106,400 and something.
How does that compare with your
I
rivals?
thought it was more. Yeah, I thought it was because Zap did 100 and something, but it
Yeah,
wasn't as much as
yeah.
it wasn't as much as Crash. Crash did.
Zap did about 85, I think.
So there's one issue. I think.
No, there was one issue went above that. The other aspect, of course, is the ABC is only the sold copies that are audited. There's always an allowance of at least 5% more that to slip through the auditing process.
Yeah, there's loads of tricks.
And then
as
there's
well
the
that we
argument
met.
about readership. We did several tests and we got a readership factor of about, I think, 4 to 1. So that meant if we sold 100,000 copies, 400,000 people were reading it.
Yeah.
It would pass on to your kids and stuff.
Mm.
Yeah.
It also got worse when they went firm sale because the magazine distributors like Smiths and Mendes used to be sale or return, so they would return them afterwards. But when they went to firm sale, you've got to be more precise about what.
Because they couldn't return them anymore.
Yeah. So they would order fewer and take.
And then your sales went down.
Yeah.
Because they started coming back rapidly.
Yeah.
So last couple of minutes then, we're running over slightly, but we did start late, so that's our excuse. Do you want to talk about how it's all kind of wound down then, and how you came to be writing books with a certain Mr. Wilkins?
Well, there's an enormous spread of time in between that.
30 years.
No, Newsfield just didn't manage to switch into either the 32-bit market and the console market very successfully. Things like LM and then Movie Magazine had actually drained the coffers quite badly. Fear, there was the Games Machine, but there was also Games Master. We bought the role-playing magazine, and a lot of those were not getting advertising. They weren't really doing big sales. Actually, Fear was selling about 15,000 to 17,000 copies a month, which for its time, yeah, wouldn't you? But even at the time, that was not so bad for such a niche magazine. But it all rolled up to the point where we had run out of funds, shareholders' funds. We had to wind Newsfield up. We fortunately, by that time, Julian Rignall's brother Jonathan was MD, and he made him managing director, and he did a deal with the Europress group in Macclesfield, and we put back together, I think, about nearly 2/3 of the staff, and in the same premises, and it became Europress Impact magazines. And we carried on with Crash, but they swapped it for an Amiga magazine with EMAT 1 month after. We had no say of that. That was Crash gone. It went into Sinclair User and vanished after 1 issue. Zap carried on probably about 3 issues, and then the bosses said, "You've got Sega Force, Nintendo Force. You've got to have Commodore Force. Zap must go." So that was the end of Zap. And you might imagine that after about 18 months of that kind of attitude and the fact that they were nicking all the advertising we were getting in, Oliver and I resigned and said, "Had it." And we formed a new company which began producing books, hit and tip books for Carlton in London. And they were selling to a company called Prima in America as well as abroad. And Prima discovered that it wasn't Carlton doing the books, it was us.
Prima's still around?
It is as an imprint of Random House, but Prima went bust with the dot-com bubble. They invested hugely, and nobody had known how they were going to make money out of it either, and then it went up, and so Prima went. Prima bought us out, which was fine, because we had a huge investment, and it worked really well for about 3 or 4 years. And in that time, Oliver and I developed for Prima a line of historical reference books, which was something we always wanted to do. And that became Prima Editions, and we went to Frankfurt, we sold ideas as packages, and when Prima went down, we did a management buyout of that end, and we formed Thalamus Publishing, because The name was still there, the artwork was Oliver's, so why not?
Yeah.
And that ran from exactly January 2000 until the end of 2009, when we finally decided reference publishing in book form was just dead. You know, you just weren't getting anywhere. So that's what I've been doing.
I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
Who thought of Zap and who did the logo? Who thought of the name of Zap?
I can't remember who thought of the name.
Well,
but I did.
the original, of course, we had Crash, so we were going to have 2 more
Bang and
magazines.
Wallace.
Bang and Wallace. Chris Anderson said, "I'll resign before you've even hired me if you call it Bang."
It was a weekly magazine.
Yeah.
I
think it was.
Future did a music magazine,
which
ironically
You did the logo. I think we had a brainstorming session with Chris one day over tandoori. And I think we came up with he wanted a sharp name like Crash, which had been laughed at by London publishers when he said, "You can't have a magazine for the computers called Crash."
We had the same thing with Zap when you phone up the publishers, because they'd never heard of
Zap.
Anyway, going from Zap 64. Sorry? Zap 64.
Yeah.
Sorry? Zap 64. ZZAP! Exclamation mark.
Don't forget the exclamation mark.
I think it's the shortest magazine name in its entirety and the longest one to actually spell out into the phone call.
Well, I think we came up with it as a worthy of like Crash of a sound and a snap and a sizzle about it. And Oliver did the logo.
Well, I forgot to ask, why I didn't understand until just this second why the 64 was in there, because Crash wasn't called Crash Spectrum.
No, but it was.
Crash 48.
But the logo was Crash. Spectrum Games Action inside under the blue underneath Spectrum Games Action.
You just had Zap input.
Yeah.
Well, I think Chris there thought the 64 would.
It had to be there.
Would fix it because it
Well,
was.
you need some kind of branding, don't you? You've already got something that's sort of...
Yeah.
But it certainly gave our reception lots of trouble on the phone, because we had a lovely girl called Carol Kinsey, who was very, very Ludlow, very local, and she'd been very difficult very Ludlow. Been very difficult to train her to actually say hello, you know, can I help you? So when she got, we said, well, now it's Crash and Zap, and she said, you don't have to do the 64 and the exclamation point. And she said, right. So I was standing in there, and the phone rings, starts ringing at 9:30 or whenever it was, and she says, Crash and Zap, hello, what can I do for you?
I've got a quick question for the audience. I was wondering if there's, these days, if there's anything similar, you get a similar vibe to that whole Newsfield. Is there anything out there at the moment that echoes that in any particular way, shape or form? It's not an ego thing, I'm just curious to know if there's anything out there. I don't tend to read a great deal.
The internet's killed it. You can find out your news now rather than waiting until the middle of the month for the magazine.
Sure. Because you still got, there's more characters trying to do most through like PewDiePie, through YouTube and so on. That's at least kind of embodying a similar sort of spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's sort of games help and playing games and actually making an art form.
Well, yeah, the Let's Plays now are now your tip sections. Yeah, they're very.
It was kind of an umbrella for a lifestyle, wasn't it, really? A way of living, which you can't get off the internet, not the same way, I don't think.
Odd zero punctuation.
Similar, yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they tend to have quite chatty videos as well.
Yeah, it's a big community.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good reference. I'm just surprised there's not more of it, because it's as a format, it's a great one. I like.
Yeah, I think maybe it appeals to a certain niche of personality.
Sure.
I think the videogamer.com is a bit like that too. There's a lot of personality-driven stuff.
I've checked those out. I've Giant Bomb, I'm aware of it.
Onto the screen.
Yeah.
Giant Bomb video game or videos and stuff. I mean, Giant Bomb has 3-hour podcasts.
Yes, I've seen some of the Giant Bombers. The other good thing about them, you can generally skim through them if you want to pick the bits out that you want, which is quite good. Yeah, but I like that. To me, that works. I'm going to trust somebody. I think that's one of the things that worked for us. We were more trustworthy in the sense that there was someone accountable to it, and also we really did give a shit with the not waving or anything. But we really did care about the ratings. I mean, we were very concerned that if I'm putting my face and I'm saying those words and that rating's going, then we're not going to piss around here. We're not going to go, oh fuck it, we'll just stick that rating on there. And so it's a big ocean game, then we'll definitely rate that really highly. Because none of that ever went on. It's one of the questions that get asked a lot was there ever any bribes or biases? There were a few times where I tried to creep in, but we were basically fuck off.
I think certainly with Giant Bomb, I think generally the staff on that are doing it primarily
passion.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that the way it was formed, Giant Bomb, is quite interesting in the sense that I can't remember the guy's name, the lead guy was one of the head of
the beady guy.
GameSpot, and they were trying to bribe to gain better reviews for certain titles, and he basically said absolutely not. And it became a massive scandal, and he got fired for it and started up Giant Bomb for it. So that's kind of where it comes from.
Awesome. Sincerity, yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen. We're going to have to wrap it up there. We did run slightly over, but it's all good stuff. So I'm sure everyone will join me in thanking our first panel of the weekend, Newsfield. Thank you.